I remember being at my son's baseball game, having a caregiver call off, having to jump in my car, and crying. And it's situations like that that lead to burnout. We are on 24/7. And so I think so many of us reach that burnout phase, but we don't necessarily have to.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zengage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. All right, welcome back to another episode of Home Care Hindsight. I'm joined today by Tiffany Dutcher. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
For people who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
I have been in home care for 15 years now in different capacities. What started as an owner, ended up being a franchise business coach, then went on to decide to write a book, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about the book. Today is the 12th. We're recording not on the 12th, taking people behind the curtain and saying we don't record these bad boys live and shove them out to the world. But the book comes out tomorrow, May 13th. First of all, where can people get it?
So they can find it on Amazon, and there will be ebooks, there will be hardback for the moment, and eventually there will be softcover as well.
Amazing. And the book is The Unfiltered Truth About Home Care. So talk a little bit about like how you got your start in home care, why you wrote the book and what you hope people get out of it.
Yeah, so my story is a little bit different than a lot of owners. So many owners go into this because they had a loved one that needed, help, and they didn't get the care that they needed. And so it pushed them to pursue, opening up an agency to be able to provide care better. My story starts right out of college during a recession when, quite frankly, there were no other jobs available. And so I had a friend who connected me with an owner of a home care agency here in Dallas. And I was offered a job, not really knowing what home care was. So stepped into the world, kind of clueless. And what I thought eventually I would become a sales rep for, started in the office, jumped in quickly. And what I learned is his office was a mess. And so that was my first lesson about myself is I like to dive in, drive hard, fix things quick. And that's exactly what I did. So started working on the office, getting things in order to be able to scale. And then became owner, and I was an owner for about 8 years before we ended up selling. So that was kind of my start in home care. I did grow to love what we did. I absolutely love our seniors. I loved our caregivers. So although I didn't go into it with an intention, I definitely found my passion and my mission while I was in the middle of it.
I love that. Well, thanks for coming on the show. You're here because you're somebody who has done the thing, has coached people how to do the thing, and now is, written a book about how to do the thing the right way. But I don't bring people on to talk about that stuff. Instead, I bring successful people on to talk about the big mistake that they made in their business and what that mistake taught them about life or about business. So, Tiffany, what's your big mistake?
Yeah, so looking back, I think my biggest mistake, and this is kind of what took root in writing the book, and we'll go into it, is not understanding how I was wired as a leader. And looking back, while I drove hard and fast and I grew that agency, I left a lot of my employees in the dust sometimes, wondering exactly where we were going and how they were going to keep up with the growth. And so my biggest lesson was understanding who you are as a leader, which back then I am very high level. I am very fast, and I like to move yesterday. And a lot of times looking back, I could see how my employees were wide-eyed thinking, how do we keep up with her? Home care is a lot. And now I have an owner that's just running us over.
What do you feel like was the first time that you were like, oh, my leadership style, while good, has some unintended consequences that are causing some real issues for the business?
Yeah, so we were actually having a meeting one day, and I remember her name was Karen. She looked at me and she said, Tiffany, I don't understand I don't understand why you come in and change processes so fast.
Mm.
You come in and you tear things apart, and then you don't really explain to us why or what's going on or where we're going next. You just expect us to be able to keep up with you. Now, and don't get me wrong, I had a great relationship with my employees, but I now understand and get a sense of how they felt and why, as I understand what my leadership type was.
Yeah. So you talk a little bit about like burnout, or a lot about in the book about burnout, and I think there's so many home care owners I talk to who feel very much run ragged by the business, and like it's a stressful business. Let's not pretend like it's really easy and a simple mindset shift is going to make it feel like you're on cruise control. But like, you talk a little bit about kind of your experience with burnout, like first person, but also seeing it in the folks that you've worked with, and like what kind of the root cause of that is.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being at my son's baseball game, having a caregiver call off, having to jump in my car, and crying. And it's situations like that that lead to burnout. We are on 24/7. And so I think so many of us reach that burnout phase, but we don't necessarily have to. And that's where I go into the book of building the right team around you and putting the right infrastructure in place. And I think we talked about it earlier, AI and tools and things, but specific for each owner type. And we haven't really gotten into this yet, but I built a framework. There's 4 different owner types, and each of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. So I think the key is to understand yourself and how you're likely to burn out, and then building an infrastructure, whether that's tools, systems, and people, to be able to support you, because we all burn out in a different way. And I go into that in the book. One of the owner types is a humanitarian. The way they burn out is overgiving. They constantly overgive. And so building things around them where they can still give, not lose who they are, but also not lose their home life and everything else that comes with that when you stay on like that 24/7.
Yeah. You want to walk through the like 4 types of leaders, and kind of give the one liner of here is where you run into burnout and here's where your superpower is.
Yeah. So I'll start with driver because that's what I am myself. We're very visionary, fast paced, want to win, will win at any cost. And so a lot of times the burnout comes from, burning through your team. And I've seen this as I've coached driver owners. They have high expectations. They talk conceptually, and they expect their team, they're sitting at 300 feet, and their team a lot of times function at about, 50 feet. That's all they can see. And so they just cannot keep up. And so with those high expectations, with moving so fast, a lot of times they burn out because their team cannot stay with them, can't keep up, and they have constant turnover. I see that with drivers so much. Methodicals they're really good at seeing what's happening tactically on the ground. I would almost call them perfectionists. They see the details that most of us miss. And they stay in them. They expect perfection, not only from themselves, but from their employees and everybody around them. And so when everybody feels like they have to live in this world of being perfect, they're scared to move. And so a lot of times the whole agency freezes, and now the owner has to step in and make decisions, but they built that. They built that culture. And so sometimes it's saying, okay, these are the end results that we need. I trust you guys to get there, and I'm not going to sit here and stress over every single detail. It leads to burnout. Humanitarians, and I spoke on this, some of the best owners we have, when it comes down to the care they provide, hands down the best. But they're the ones who will jump in their car at a drop of a dime. And I know we all do this, but they overgive themselves to clients and to everybody else around them without having structure around them. So when they have no structure and they're constantly giving, and the business is back there with no structure, so that's stressing them out too, they burn out. The connectors burn out. So connectors, and I would say you're probably a connector. You might be able to relate to this. You thrive with people, you love people, you connect with people. It might be hard for you to have hard conversations with people about expectations. And so they burn out because they don't give clear expectations to their team. And so, their team doesn't perform at the level they need to be able to maintain the agency and grow. And so when that happens, you might keep the right people in the wrong seat for a long period of time. That's gonna burn you out as an owner. And so everybody burns out a little bit differently. The whole point of the book is to understand where your burnout usually shows up and why, and to do things differently.
So, how did you learn to do things differently?
I didn't back then. That's the whole point of the book. And as I was coaching owners, I started forming these theories, and I did study psychology, and I would see patterns. People usually follow patterns, and that's where these styles came from. And so I would watch their tendencies, I would watch how they function, and I would watch how they burn out. And that's where I started forming theories around, okay, these owners have to understand themselves, and there's a framework here. So I'm going to build a book to, help them. But I didn't figure it out at the time. And where I was passionate as an owner for my caregivers and clients, that passion grew as I became a coach, because my heart would go out for these owners. I would watch them burn out. I'd watch them get in for the right reasons. And my biggest why as a coach was to help them get out of that. And that was where this book really started.
Mm, I think that's great. As you've worked with owners, and you think about kind of the success stories of seeing people build the kind of people and processes and technology in that help to mitigate the risks that they uniquely have as a person. What are some of the things that have been most validating for you to see with the folks that you've worked with?
Yeah, so I work with methodical owners a lot, and they're kind of my favorite because I'm really the gas and they're the brake. And so while they put on their brake, as I explain themselves, to explain them to themselves, I help them understand you're naturally risk adverse. You're always looking at the bottom line, but you're protecting the bottom line so hard that you're not bringing in the things that are going to move you forward. And so for somebody like that, if you don't understand the why, you're not going to change things. And so it's helping them truly understand themselves and why they won't make these decisions, and getting into, their mindset a little bit. There's a mindset component that goes into this, and helping them understand the why they aren't moving forward or making the decisions, and then getting them to pull the trigger. That would be a great example. Once I can get a methodical out of the minutia, once I can get them to stop thinking, what is the risk in this, and start thinking, what is the reward in doing this, then I can help them move the needle in their business. Same with humanitarians. While I want to keep them in the space of my mission comes first, I want to help people. I help them understand if you don't have organization, if you don't have structure, you're not really helping people. You're helping 2 or 3 people, and you're getting stuck there. So I help them open up their mind to, we can help more people. This is why, and this is how. And then we start building around that. They still have that touch. That is still so special in the way they provide care. And it is still their selling point, whether they want to say they're selling or not. But it's really just building around that person.
Okay, I want to move to a section of the show where I ask you about something that you think is overrated in home care. Everybody's talking about it, but you don't think it's all it's cracked up to be, or people are thinking about it kind of in the wrong way.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an answer that maybe you're not expecting.
Okay.
One of the things I think is overrated is and going back to why I wrote the book, everyone being handed the same playbook, everybody being coached the same, everybody thinking they can do it the same way their neighbor did it. And if that were true, if you put 10 people in a room at a conference and they all got the same information and downloaded it, they would all go back and have the same success and grow at the same rate, correct?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So what I think is overrated is trying to run your business just like somebody else without understanding who you are.
I think there's a lot of that, right? Every network that I'm in, whether it's a franchise network or, you've got some independent agencies who've gotten together and built kind of some affinity groups. There's people in the business that you're like, oh, I want to just be just like John or Steve or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing you say is trying to be just like that person without taking into account who are they as a leader and who am I as a leader, and understanding how they're going to execute differently from you sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is frustration, burnout, all the things we talked about earlier.
Yeah. One of the things that I think about is I run into home care owners from time to time, and I'm sure you know some people like this too, who it just feels like home care is easier for them than for other people. And I think there's a degree to which there's some comparison as the thief of joy, why can't my business be just like theirs? But I do think they've found something, and I think this is kind of what your book speaks to, but they've found something about how to run a home care agency that doesn't run them that other people want to be like. But I think my question is, how do you execute on the process of getting from where you are today to getting to where they are in terms of their headspace and their peace with the business, but understanding that there's going to be some critical differences between me and them,
Yeah.
that mean that my path isn't the same as theirs? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So it goes back to, I think, first evaluating who you are. So let's make a list, or let's follow the book and see, okay, these are my tendencies. These are what I'm going to do. Then it comes down to building, and it's, we're going to go back and repeat some of the same things: building the right team around you and putting the right tools in front of you. But if you don't take a look at what's going on inside of you first, and you're trying to fix everything else on the outside, you're not going to see progress. You're going to continue to have the same problems the same way, and maybe you scale a little bit, but those problems just get a little bit bigger.
I think that's good. What else do you see as like the biggest changes that home care owners need to make to get out of the mold of like, here's the one size fits all approach and get into something that like uniquely works for their business?
I think there's a few things there's so much new coming in, right? We have this new technology, and it's moving faster than it ever has. I think it's so important that we start really looking at this. And I do think that home care is very cart and buggy. We like to take our time. We like to, see what's going to happen across the road. We like to let somebody else test it out for 2 years and then adopt it. And there's really not time for that, right? I think we've got to make decisions quickly. And so that means taking the time to find what's right for you. I think the other piece of this puzzle, and what I've really started helping owners with as I was coaching, I realized, A, I can't outcoach leadership, and B, I can't outcoach a bad team. And I think that's really getting on board with intentionally designing teams. And that does come around how you're wired. As a methodical, you're a lot of brick. That means you got to add some gas in there. So finding a way to build the people that complement you, but also give you parts of something that you're not.
Yeah, give me an example of like what you saw happen in a team where I think it's easy to hire to your strengths. You get more people who are like you and that you naturally get along with, and you all have like similar working styles. But give me an example of like somebody that you saw change the makeup of their team or the way that their team was structured and interacted as a result of like who they were as a leader.
Yeah. So there was an office that I coached, and I encouraged him to bring on a sales rep. And he was my typical methodical owner, down in the weeds. I want the details. And so we brought on this sales rep who was amazing. He was go fast, go hard. I'm going to meet people, but the owner initially wanted him to come in the office for an hour and a half every day, debrief, give him all the details of how the sales calls went. And the first 2 months were a struggle. There was friction between the two. As their coach, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to lose a great sales rep. And so I really had to sit down this methodical owner and say, listen, you are not wired the same. And if we had a sales rep that stayed in the details, they would never be out there moving things forward. And so it was really just coaching him on the dynamic of why he can't expect him to operate the same way he does. And what happens when you do is you slow somebody down who goes fast. And what does going fast do? It builds. And so that was a great dynamic that I was able to shift. And it was very uncomfortable for this methodical owner. It really was. It almost made him crawl out of his skin. But after a while, as I said, trust the process, let him get out there, let the referrals speak for themselves. After so much time, he realized, okay, there's something to this. I get why you told me I needed somebody who made me, quite frankly, feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Do you see because it makes sense to me that like a methodical would have a lot of trouble with a seller who is going to be a very unstructured person.
Yeah.
One right here, but also is going to be like looking to move fast and break stuff. What do you see as kind of the like yin to the yang of each of the other personality types that you've laid out?
Yeah, so humanitarians, they're really good at bringing on people who they love, who they, feel like their heart comes first. And don't get me wrong, all sales reps should have heart. That's not what I'm saying. But, a humanitarian brings on another humanitarian sales rep, and I see this happen. Well, when you're a humanitarian, and you'll see this in the book, it is hard for you to ask for the business because you want to give it away. If you could give it away to everybody, you would. And so you bring on somebody just like you who also wants to hand away the business, who has trouble having the hard conversations. Now you have two people out there who everybody loves, are spreading all the resources to everybody. but they're never asking for the business. And so that is the tendency of the humanitarian. And so that also for them, it makes it makes them uncomfortable to have a driver. It makes them super uncomfortable. It feels like you are putting pressure on relationships, and it just doesn't feel right. And so same thing, just kind of connecting those dots to why it's important to have somebody that can drive the business. Because at the end of the day, the more business you have, the more people you can take care of, the more lives you can touch, and the better care they're receiving because you are a good owner.
Yeah. What about for the connector? What's the person that's like hardest for them to work alongside?
Yeah, it's really hard for connectors to really work with people on the back end that are kind of their brakes. If you're thinking about compliance, somebody that doesn't feel relational.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so when
compliance isn't relational. Sorry, that's my knee-jerk reaction
it's
happening there.
not. It's not. HR, the back end part of HR, not always relational, but it's things that have to be kept up because when your state surveyor walks in, they don't care how much your caregivers love you. They care about, are the documents in place? So you run the background checks. Yep. And so it's hard for them to have somebody like that in the office. It honestly makes them uncomfortable too. I walk in, this person would rather be in their room with the door shut, working with numbers, data, information, than they would be talking to the rest of the staff. That's hard for them. A driver also hates brakes. Man, it makes them feel like they're just slowing them down.
Yeah. Yeah. The compliance detail work does not make them very happy.
No. I mean, they would literally drive the bus till the wheels fall off if they could. And normally they do until they get slapped on the hand. And they're like, okay,
Sure.
now you gotta watch this.
Yeah. Okay, I want to transition. I asked you about a big mistake that you'd made, but I want to ask you now about a little mistake that you see other home care owners make all the time. And if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better.
So one of the things I see owners do wrong would probably be hiring off of resumes. And so this is where it also goes into wiring. And so as I've started working with owners lately, and I've learned about organizational design as I'm an advisor now. You can hire to a resume, but a resume doesn't tell the whole story. So it's really understanding what are the deliverables of a position. Once you understand the deliverables of a position, then you can figure out what kind of wiring does the person need to be successful. So now you're taking the guesswork out of hiring because hiring is a big move. Turnover costs you a lot, whether it's in the office or anywhere else. And so that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is just hiring to someone's resume and guessing still when it comes to putting the right person in the right seat. 80% of business problems are people problems. 20% are system problems. Systems are run by people.
Tell me how people should change their hiring process, their interview process, especially as it relates to admin roles. Because I think, caregiver hiring is always going to be a volume-based game. It's, you want to try and qualify for fit, but you've got to get enough velocity coming through that you're going to make some mistakes along the way, especially as a newer owner where you're just hiring, because you've got to have somebody come in right as you have a client come in, and it's just a different ballgame. So as it relates to the administrative hiring part of the game, what are the things that you think people need to incorporate as tools or as checks and balances along the way to avoid seeing somebody's resume getting excited and already being 90% of the way to making a decision?
Yeah. So, I mean, think about especially if you're an owner that's maybe sitting at 1 million. Your next hire can make or break your growth. It can slow it down, whether it be a scheduler. A bad scheduler, think about what happens. They aren't scheduling things correctly. They're missing things. You're losing clients. Your reputation plummets. I mean, that hire alone is so essential to the agency. And so leaving it up to luck to me is just kind of insanity. We've advanced and behavioral analytics are out there putting data around a position. Does this person, one of the traits we look at is their pace patience. Do they move fast or do they move methodically? Can they keep up with variety or do they want to start at A and end at Z? I had an employee like this and I had her in a position that required a lot of variety. Now, every time the phone rang and I heard her have to pick it up and get frustrated, it makes so much more sense to me. So it's really determining what does this role require, finding the right wiring, and then using behavioral analytics to hire somebody based on that. It takes the guesswork out.
One of the things that I see is as businesses scale, of course, you need more capacity, you need more people. But I talk to a lot of businesses who hire for a growth curve that doesn't stay steady. And home care is like the place to go if you want a business that's two steps forward, one step back. And
Mhm.
so, how do you think about not just like getting the right people in the seats, but the kind of pace of hiring or how to build a team that's built to scale, but also isn't so far out over its skis because we've hired for 6 months from now today that you're stressed about stuff like making payroll?
Yeah. So at first, I think you have to identify your biggest weakness. Is that sales right now? Is that recruiting? Like, what is it that's stopping you from being able to reach that next level? You can already identify it with the team that you have, right? Yeah. So then I think next is getting somebody in that position that's going to drive the business forward. At the same time, making sure you have the back end set up to be able to handle that growth, right? Because then you get in another problem. You have somebody out there making sales. All of a sudden, the team on the back end just cannot handle all the things. And so I think where owners get in trouble is they just look at one position instead of the whole puzzle to figure out, once I put this in place, what's going to happen next? What's going to be the domino effect?
One thing I want to get your take on, I feel like just from conversations with a lot of owners who are earlier in their journey, one of the like biggest failure rate hires is a salesperson.
Mhm.
And of course that like induces so much pressure on the rest of your team because you've hired an operating team expecting a level of growth. You bring in a salesperson who aren't cheap and then they don't deliver the growth that you're expecting. What have you seen about qualifying for and hiring great salespeople that can reduce some of that failure risk? Because that feels like somewhere, even if you're a great marketer as an owner, like at some point you've got to get out of that because the business growth can't depend on you and only you.
Yeah. So I think you got to look at a few things. Where am I at in my territory right now? Do I have relationships already developed? Is somebody starting from scratch? So then we're narrowing down, do I need a hunter or do I need a farmer? And so we got to start looking at it that way. And it really depends. There's not one clear answer on that. It's going to be on a case by case basis. And so then we start looking at, okay, well, this person says they're a hunter, but are they actually a hunter? So you really got to narrow that down too. And there's ways to look at that. I don't so much care if somebody has home care experience. We can teach them that as long as they have a good heart and they believe in our mission. What I care about is, do they have it in them to either hunt, if that's what I need, or are they a good farmer and can they truly connect with people? We can teach them the rest. I think what happens so many times is, owners find somebody that's done home health. And so they think this person has contacts, they're going to be great. But, or even wound care is another example I've seen recently. And so this person does have contacts, but really what we learned is those contacts were referring to the company, not her. Well, our business is a lot more relational than that.
Yeah. Well, and even folks who are coming from home care agency to home care agency, hey, I have all these referral sources. Who are they referring to? Are they referring to the company or to the person?
Exactly.
And I always think, and sorry if any sales reps looking for to make a jump from one agency to another are listening, but like you are looking for a reason. There's a reason you're looking for a new job. And if you're crushing it in the way that you say you are, stay where you are, dude.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of times where there's almost like some negative signal to industry experience because sure they know the space, but like why are they looking for a job if they know the space as well? And I don't want to like be too like Debbie Downer because it can be hard out there. There's a lot of reasons that people are looking for jobs. They could be working for a crazy person. There's several crazy people in home care, but I do think like there's sometimes in addition to hiring the resume, we over-index on the person's network and how hard it is to build those relationships in the first place. Maybe it's not as hard as we think it is, but more importantly, who is the relationship that they're claiming as their own? Who is that relationship actually with?
Yeah. Well, and the good thing about hiring a rep like that is if they truly have those contacts, they know how to sell home care. If you're not immediately getting referrals, there's your answer. And
Yep.
yep, I hate that
What's
has to
your
happen.
because there's some runway, right? Like
Yeah.
in your view, how long does it need to take before a new sales rep starts generating results?
So this is the way I like to measure it. If it's somebody that's never been in the territory, maybe they're even new to home care, I think what you're measuring the first 3 months are the nature of the relationships they're building. And that requires the owner going out with them every once in a while. And it's not to babysit them, but what I want to know is when she walks into a building she says she has a relationship with, or he, how does it actually feel? What am I actually seeing? So at 3 months, I'm not necessarily expecting referrals. Maybe one or two are trickling in, but people have to trust you. They want to know you're coming back. They've seen 100 reps come and go. They see the revolving door. Great, awesome. You're one of a million.
And so then like an established rep who's been in the territory, what are you seeing there in terms of like leading indicators that show you've made a good hire?
Yeah, that's why. I think that's what I said. I think within a few weeks, you should see at least one or two referrals, right?
We talked about a lot of mistakes, but I like to end every episode on a high note. So tell me about something that's happened lately in your business that you're really proud of.
So right now I'm doing organizational design for home care owners. And so that's really getting the right people in the right seats to scale their agency. And there's an agency I'm working with. We've definitely hit where we've started scaling. We're seeing a 20% lift, but also what I'm seeing happening with the owners now that they have the right people in the right seat, they're not burning out anymore. And so I think a big win for me is while coaching was very fulfilling, I found a way to be able to do even more for them and to give them back their life while actually helping them grow, because we know scaling isn't easy in this business. If it were easy, everyone would have already hit 5-10 million.
Well, that's great. Okay, cool. Well, before we get out of here today, what do you want to plug?
Yeah, so I am a culture index advisor, and what I do is I work with CEOs on designing the right team with the right people. That's powered by using behavioral analytics, but it doesn't stop there. The behavioral analytics is the tool. What I do is I work with the owner every single month on, okay, where do we need to go next? Where do we need to bring strategy in? And what's going to get us to the next level? And so my goal is the same as their goal, and that's to grow their agency.
It's great. Well, Tiffany, thanks so much for coming on the show today. And the book comes out Amazon, other places tomorrow, May 13th, Wednesday. And super excited for people to get this in their hands and take a look.
Thank you, David.
On behalf of the team here at Zengage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zengage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.